All right, good afternoon, Warriors. Good to see you all. Welcome to our final Zoom of this course. Again, I hope you all are having a great week. Let's take a look at what we're going to do today. So here's our map check. This is it. For better or for worse, tears of joy, tears of sorrow, tears of neither. We're going to go through. We're going to prep for the final exam. Got a lot of stuff to do today and should be a good time. On Friday, I'm going to post class interaction and participation, and that will close out all assessments prior to the final exam. Okay, so on Friday, if not sooner, you'll know where you stand, so to speak, in this course, and you can make your decisions about what you want to do toward the final exam and your other classes for that matter. And then I'll talk more about reading day reps here in a second. And our final exam is going to be, actually, I want to make a change to this while we're here. It's going to be from 3 to 5:30 on Wednesday, the 13th. That's 1 week from today. So reading day reps, these are optional. This is for Friday. I should have that on a slide, so I apologize for that. I'm offering times. All the times in gray are booked. That's what this little legend down here means. So I have times from 9 to 10. I have times from 10:30 to 12. They're going slightly fast. It's not anything you need to freak out about. But the bottom line is, if you want to spend a half hour with me on reading day on Zoom with questions about material and things like that, then you can sign up. Just email me directly. I don't have a place where you can go on the internet and do that. But if you email me and tell me what time you'd like, we'll make it work. If you don't, that's okay too. That's all up to you. So there's that. So here's our agenda for today. We're recording right now. Here in a second, we're going to do our class photo. It's something that's kind of tradition that I like to do. And then we're going to go into the details about the final exam. First, we'll talk about how the final exam is going to structure. Then I have a highlight reel for you, so I'll spend a little bit of time on that. And along the way, I'll talk about some highlights from the quiz that you all took on Monday. And then we have some Kahoot lined up. And then I'll spend just a few minutes at the end kind of closing out the course. So before I begin, are there any questions, big or small, from anyone out there? Okay, so what I'm doing right now is setting up for our class photo. So if you would like to be in the photo, all I'm going to do is take a snapshot of my second screen here. So I'll give you a moment if you want to turn your video on for that so we can see your happy warrior face. And I'll just give a 3, 2, 1 here, and everybody can smile at the camera as if they were actually doing it. 3, 2, 1. Super. And I'll post that on Canvas later today and on Instagram and all that other good stuff. Okay. Let me get back set up here real quick. I have too many things open, sorry. Just taking me a bit. All right, super. Here we go. Okay, so first things first, what do I have back here? All right, let's talk about the basics behind a final exam, just to review. Our time is not Tuesday, 12 May. I apologize for that. It is Wednesday, the 13th of May, and it will be from 3 to 5:30 p.m. It will be 100 points. So in terms of how this will appear to you, same way as last time. It'll appear on Canvas assignments. I've gotten smarter than since then. So that either way, whether you punch into the respective day on Canvas or if you punch into Canvas assignments, either way, it will take you to the exam packet. It won't be in Excel. Again, I apologize for that. It'll be in a Word document, just like last time. Let's talk about access to me during the exam. I will be standing by during your exam. I'm not going to do Zoom this time, but I am going to be available on email and telephone. And you'll have my telephone number. That'll be in the exam instructions. So if you have any questions at all during the exam, please get hold of me, email me, give me a call. I will be sitting by. I'll be literally be sitting here in my home office, doing other things, but waiting for you to ask questions the same way I would be in the classroom. I'm not going to be off lifting weights or doing something else. The exam will be in a Word document. So if you had issues last time downloading, working in Word, and then uploading it again, let's resolve those now. Okay. And, just so if you have any doubt, I got some tests back in different formats. Most of that I can work through. But I really don't like rolling the dice on these things. So I would prefer that if you have any issues at all and you can't solve them, get hold of me now and say, hey, I'm kind of at a loss of how to solve this particular issue. I will provide a link later. I'll post it on today's page on how you can get free access to Microsoft 365 as a student. There's nothing illegal about it. It's totally above board. You go to the site. I think you have to set up an account. It probably takes all of 30 seconds. And you get the whole Microsoft Office package. I don't know what they're calling it these days. I think they're calling it 365. So you can get Excel, you can get Word, you can get other programs that you probably don't need. And that should solve a lot of the issues as I understand them. Okay, but as terms of the basics, the bottom line is the conduct of the exam will be very much like last time in terms of when it will be posted, how you get to it, how you can get access to me, and those kind of things. Okay. In terms of the hit list, it's chapters 1 through 10. So it's everything we've talked about in this course. And yes, this is a comprehensive final exam. And I do need to say that. And I do need to say that on average, student scores, warrior scores go down a little bit on this exam. I don't think it's necessarily because the exam is any more difficult. I do think it's because it's a comprehensive exam. There might be material that folks haven't touched in a while. And so if you don't dust that stuff off in your brain housing group, you might miss a few details. So I just feel the need to say that. Again, you make the choices that are right for you. So I don't want to pull that up yet. What I want to do is pull up my other slideshow presentation. And all these slideshow presentations are on your Canvas for today. So let's talk about a little bit of prep in terms of structure and then some highlights. So in terms of the format of the final, it'll be largely the same structure you've seen before with an additional short essay and a true-false question section. So to talk this top to bottom, you'll have a multiple choice section, 15 questions, 5 choices per question, 2 points each. You've encountered that before. What you haven't encountered before is a true-false section. And so it's going to be titled, What Would Ono Say? It's stemming out of our discussions about lean. So I'm going to hit some of those high points today and kind of get you thinking about some what would Ono say questions. And then when we do the Kahoot, there's, I think, at least 2 what would Ono say type of questions in there. Again, these are true, false. So even if you are not really sure what you're talking about, you have a 50% chance of getting the correct answer. Ideally, we want to do much better than that. Then you're going to have 2 short essays like you've countered in the past. Each of them will be worth 15 points apiece. On the first one, you have a choice of 3. And on the second one, you have a choice of 2. And then you have a long essay, and there you can choose from 1 of 2. Okay, so that's the structure for the final exam. Any questions on this? Okay, pretty straightforward. All right, so moving along, recommended prep tactics. I don't have any kind of new recommended ways to prepare for this exam than I've had in the past. I would review this review. I guess the one thing I would say is I do have some practice questions posted for you. So let me pull that up and show you what that looks like very briefly. So this is our Canvas for today. And if you go down here to extras to this Mad Skills practice questions and you open that, there's a document there that says Mad Skills practice questions. And of course it disappears. Here we go. I know what you're thinking, boomer. My kids say it to me every day, so you can't beat them out. All right, so it's just a couple practice kind of essay questions that, you know, it's up to you how far you go with these. You could look at them and say, oh, that's nice, and do nothing with them. You could maybe make an outline for each one, kind of jog your memory on some things. You could share that with me if you wanted to and say, hey, you know, do you think this would be a good outline, a good approach to answering this question? You could write a full essay if you wanted to. I don't know if I would actually do that. I think outlining would be worthwhile. Someone probably along the way is going to ask me, well, where are the answers to these? Well, I'm not providing the answers to these. I just, for a number of reasons, but these are some practice questions. Personally, I think that if you spent some degree of time looking these over, it would be worth your while. Are you going to see any question like this verbatim on the exam? No, you're not. But I think it's worth your time to look at them. And I think that if you spend time on these, again, I don't know another way to say it, it would be time well spent. So those are there for you on today's Canvas. To go back to this, beyond that, you know, we have videos. So as you assess, kind of, you look at the chapter 1 through 10 kind of topic list, and you go, where do I start in this, you know, in this haystack? If there are areas that pop out to you or things that I say today that you're like, I really have no idea what that is, then you kind of have to make a decision on what to do with that. The good thing is that we've recorded every session we've had. So you have the unique ability to go back and watch something again. And that's something I would definitely recommend that you do in case you encounter or hear something today and you're like, that doesn't sound familiar to me. Okay. But everything else applies to what we've done before. Assess your strengths and your weaknesses, develop depth in areas, think of examples that work for you, and reach out and ask questions where you either want validation that you're headed in the right direction or that you're stuck. Okay. Reach out to fellow warriors or reach out to me, whether you schedule reading day, rep time, or not. And with that, we'll go into this highlight reel. So, of course, I've always got to say it all comes back to this framework here. You just can't go wrong with this by starting with this. Even a lot of things that we've done in the last couple weeks really gravitate back to this. So the point of this is just looking at this and kind of asking the question, how deep can I go in any one of these things? And if nothing else, having this side by side as you look at other things and always being able to relate it back to this. So I think that's, you get a lot of mileage from that. And now I'm going to go specifically and highlight recent territory where we've been that I think it might be worthwhile for you to think more about and assess how much of it comes back to mind or doesn't, depending on what it is. So here we've got sales and operations planning. This is out of our last part of chapter 8, and the text, this is actually the last couple pages of chapter 8. In the video that I made for this, I think it was a standalone video that I did not do live with you. I think the last part of the video, I'd actually draw this diagram that I've now made into a PowerPoint. So just to talk about sales and operations planning relatively quickly, it begins with the marketing component of value chain, and it begins with a forecast. And marketing takes a look at what we know about demand of a product or service, and they start developing what they think that demand is going to be in the future. Of course, that's what a forecast is. It's a look into the crystal ball. What do we think is going to happen? Now, forecast is not the plan. The difference is the forecast is what we think will happen in terms of demand. The plan is what we're going to do about that. So for example, if the forecast is 200,000, are we going to try to produce and sell 200,000? And so that's where we get this arrow. And so then we get to the number 2. So marketing, for example, says, hey, we think the demand is going to be 200,000 over the next quarter. And they pass that forecast to operations. And the reason they pass it to operations is because operations are the ones who have to produce that 200,000 or not. And so what operations does, and this is where the plan begins to form. Operations looks at their capacity. They look at how much labor they have. They look at how many machines they have. In today's environment, they probably look at inbound and outbound raw material and those type of things. And they say, hey, here's what we can do towards that 200,000. They might say, hey, we have the capacity to produce 180,000 in the next quarter, but not 200,000 without something changing. What might be a change? Well, if we get additional labor, we might be able to produce that 200,000. If we get additional machines, we might be able to produce that 200,000. And so, this is where the discussion continues to evolve. And so that's where this gray box comes in. In my mind, this pink box is all about assessing 3 things. One is the relevance, meaning how relevant is the forecast? The next thing is how feasible is it for us to accomplish the forecast? If it's 200,000 and our max capacity is 170,000, then making a plan to produce 200,000 may not be very feasible. Okay, just isn't possible, kind of thing. But we also have money involved. Money makes the world go round. So finance has to be quickly brought into this discussion. And sometimes it's a negotiation because everybody wants money. And marketing has the advertising component. So they need to spend money on advertising so that we can come even close to that 200,000 or not. All right. So it very quickly, everybody's kind of fighting for money. Operations may say, hey, well, we need 2 more machines, or we need a whole new labor crew. We need to work a 3rd shift, or we need to invest in a new supplier to get these technologies or commodities or whatever. And so, very quickly it's this back and forth. And I say discussion, oftentimes it's a negotiation between these 3 components of a company. And at some point, and that's why this line is dotted, because this really becomes a circular discussion, and it has to be a group discussion and negotiation. And eventually these 3 components have to come to an agreement, and the agreement is in the form of a plan. Now, none of them decide on the plan. That's the 4th component, which is executives in a company. Usually companies have either one person that makes all the decision, or they might have a board. That board might be vice presidents of the company that are each from these functions. It's done in a number of ways. But the bottom line is, the executive is the one that at the end of the day has to take the risk. So for example, if marketing says, hey, we really think the forecast for next quarter is 200,000, the executive has to decide how much they believe that 200,000 in that prediction. And so the executive might say, I really believe that. And so we're going to try to meet that 200,000, and maybe we're going to stretch ourselves to do that. But what if demand really turned out, once the smoke is cleared, to be like 20,000? Okay, then we have like 180,000 units excess kind of thing. And it's wasteful and we can't get rid of it. And so the executive has to live with the decision that they make. And that's why they kind of come in, not at the last minute, but they're not going to come in until these 3 components have developed a plan to present to them for decision. And usually what I've seen, it's more than just, hey, here's the plan. Usually it's 2 to 3 options kind of thing. So in this example, it might be, hey, we think the forecast is 200,000. And so one option we have is to produce 210,000, just in case we're a little bit short and the forecast turns out to be higher. Another option is middle of the road, maybe 190,000. And then one option is a high risk where we go way low and we just produce 120,000. And so the executives need to kind of listen to all that. And sometimes the executives come up with their own plan. They say, hey, I've heard all the options and here's what I want you to do. I've been in many situations where I saw that. So, but it's kind of a church and state kind of thing. Usually the executives stay out of it until they've heard everybody. And I've often seen it where, one of these groups will try to kind of go behind the other one. So marketing will try to go to the executives and say, hey, here's what we think, and here's how much money we need. And then executives will say, well, have you bounced this off of operations and finance? Well, no, we haven't. We'll go back and talk to them. I don't want to talk to you until you've done that. So here's the bottom line on sales and operations planning. This is the process, and the output from this whole thing is a plan that is relevant, feasible, and affordable, okay, to some degree. It might have a lot of risk with it, but it's still affordable, feasible, and relevant. So that's the sales and operations planning process. And I think it's valuable to you beyond this course because you'll see many job descriptions. As you see, there's many components of business involved in this. And you might be in another component that's kind of non-value chain specific, but you're going to hear this term, oh, it's time for our quarterly sales and operations planning. And very much like forecasting, whether you're involved in it or not, you got to live it. So if somebody comes up with a terrible plan and you're like, who came up with this? You've got to execute it. So I always say, if you've got to execute it, well, you might as well know how it was derived. Okay. So that you know what you're dealing with. Okay, so from here, we're going to move on to the lean discussion. And what I would like you to think about during today, we'll have a few questions on this, but during your preparation, is you kind of got to get inside the head of Ono himself. Remember, the godfather of lean, and think about what would he say if he heard something, if he saw a statement. Would he say, "Oh, that sounds like a good idea," or "No, that sounds like a terrible idea"? So know your Ono. O in this case is like a true, and no is like a false. Okay, so let's just kind of hit the high points of the lean philosophy. All right, I'm going to talk about this yellow box here in a second. I have a different slide on that. Here on inventory, we know that Ono was not a fan of high inventory. Now, that being said, when we do lean, remember where we are in terms of uncertainty and certainty. Lean only really works when we've got a low degree of uncertainty. In other words, we've got a high degree of certainty. So, Toyota, Motorola, Harley Davidson, um, big companies, probably Apple these days, um, who really have a good idea of their demand. Even with launching new products, Apple has launched so many products that they have enough historical data to know that when they launch a new product, how it's going to do. Um, so those kind of companies are in that quadrant, that efficient quadrant that can really effectively do lean. And of course, COVID has kind of turned this whole thing on its ear, but probably those companies, with the exception of products from China and stuff like that, are still able to execute lean. So in those environments, when demand is really certain, then high levels of inventory are not necessary. And in fact, they become wasteful. And that was Ono's whole point, is that inventory masks the root causes of a lot of problems. Okay. Ono was a big, he kind of declared war on all sorts of waste. Okay. Whether it was excess motion, excess work on something, excess transportation, um, defects that weren't investigated. So it's not so much getting a defect in production and fixing it. It's, hey, what is causing that defect in the first place? And then tracing that back to the cause. Because he felt anything that was wasteful was incurring cost. And if you're incurring cost, lean is not going to work. So it's this constant attack on anything that's costly and unnecessarily costly. When we look down at these right here, so Ono, a big fan of multifunctional capability. Don't just want a machine that does one thing. I want a machine that can do 20 things. I might have to make an adjustment on it. Maybe it punches a square hole in sheet metal, but then all of a sudden we're going to do round holes. All we have to do is change that die in there within seconds, and then we can keep producing. Almost we don't have to stop production. Maybe we have sheet metal coming down the line, and then somebody hollers, "Hey, we're going to change to that round hole," and then folks can make that adjustment, but the flow doesn't stop. And for that matter, he was all about producing in small batches, keeping people empowered. He felt that if people were empowered, they would find the solutions to problems, as opposed to centralized leadership where you just kind of tell everybody what to do. So you really want to make sure you can get inside of Ono's head and answer what he would say given a certain situation. Let's talk about one area specifically, and let's talk about how to determine profit under a lean philosophy. So again, this is very, I think, deceptive. I did not get this for a long time when it was presented to me. And so I'm not going to write it out today. I would encourage you, if this doesn't resonate with you, to do what you can until it does, potentially writing it out. But the bottom line is that these equations are the same equation. All I did algebraically was I moved cost from the right side of the equation to the left side. But philosophically, they are very different. And what I mean is it's a very different approach. With a non-lean or a pre-lean kind of determining profit, remember that the heart of determining profit is first identifying what it's going to cost me to make something. And then I determine how much profit I want to make. And then I sum those two up, and that's the price that I charge the customer. And what happens is when my internal costs go up, so let's say I'm operating a production facility and my rent is $1,000 a month, and then my landlord comes to me and says, "Hey, Matt, I'm charging you $2,000 because of COVID and all this other stuff, so I'm raising your rent." So what I do under that model, if this value here was 1,000 yesterday and it becomes 2,000 today, then the price is going to go up to 1,000. That means that if Ashlyn is my customer, she comes the next week to pick up her shipment from me, and I say, "Hey, Ashlyn, you owe me $1,000 additional." And Ashlyn goes, "Why do I owe you $1,000 additional?" I said, "Because my cost goes up, so yours does too." Again, I would never talk to a customer that way. So I'm painting kind of an unrealistic example in terms of how I would dialogue with somebody, but that's what that means, is you pass that price or that cost increase, you pass that off to the customer to absorb that. Well, Ono, again, said that we can't live that way. So what he did was he developed a different model where he said, whatever the price is that we're charging the customer, we're fixing that. Again, it's like dropping a post into the ground and cementing it in so it doesn't move. So if I tell Ashlyn the price is $1,000, the price is $1,000. If my costs go up, too bad. So under that model, I could potentially have a negative profit, which means I have a loss. And Ono would say, right, that's because you have to continually find ways to keep your costs down and to decrease your cost. That should not be confused with producing cheaply. Okay. Lean is all about still preserving quality to the customer. Okay. And that was why Ono was always attacking waste, because, and you would be surprised how much waste happens on a daily basis at the risk of generalizing within a company, and people don't even realize it. Okay. So I'm not going to say waste is everywhere. That's unfair. But without the awareness of what waste is, I think a lot of people, they don't consciously say, "Hey, I'm going to be wasteful," but waste happens. And Ono was like, "Hey, we got to attack waste." Because otherwise we're going to go out of business. Because if we continually raise the price and pass that cost increase to the customer, our customers are not going to be able to afford that, and they're going to leave us. So this is a very important slide. Again, I recommend that you put this under your pillow, reflect on this, and see if it makes sense to you and if you could articulate it yourself. Moving on to inventory, there's a lot to be said about inventory. In terms of the types of inventory, I like to think of it as starting upstream and moving downstream. So we have raw materials at the top end. We take those raw materials and we produce things. In the middle of accomplishing that transformation process, we have work in progress, meaning a cookie is not yet a cookie, a motorcycle is not yet a motorcycle, a shoe is not yet a shoe, a computer is not yet a computer. That's work in progress. But at some point, we produce finished goods. That's another type of inventory. And then we need a fourth type of inventory to sustain that transformation process. We call that materials repair and operating supplies, I think is the O. For some reason, I always forget it. But MRO and raw materials are not the same thing. Raw material is a product input or service input, meaning that it becomes part of the finished good eventually. So spokes on a motorcycle, wires on the inside of a computer, that's all raw materials. Oil and lubricants that I need to put into my conveyor belt to keep it moving, that's an example of MRO. That oil and lubricant isn't part of the computer. It isn't part of the motorcycle, but I need it on hand. I need containers. I need drums of oil and lubricant, probably to some degree, in case to keep my conveyor belt moving. Okay. And then we have multiple purposes of inventory. We want to keep production moving. We want to promote some kind of independence within the supply chain. And again, some of this potentially runs counter to Ono if you don't understand the situation you're in. So Ono would say, sure, you need some inventory, but if things are certain, some of that inventory masks the problem that you have. So just remember that. With inventory, we're always trying to balance. One of the balances is setup costs and ordering costs with holding costs. Holding costs is what we need to keep things on the shelf, keep things in the warehouse. Ordering costs is what somebody charges us when we order it. Okay, so every time I order something, they may charge me $60, but for me to store it might cost $200. So I'm always trying to balance those. And then we have additional key terms like reorder point, lead time, and demand during lead time. So it's important to know all those things. And then within the last week or last session, a week ago, we talked about the 7 tools of quality. I put them all on one slide for you. I like to think about, again, whether you're in a tool shed or whatever, you're kind of floats your boat, whether you're a musician, you have tools, or whether you're like the Punisher and you've got all these weapons. Not all of these are created equally, and not all of them do the same thing. So I'm not going to go over each one of these. I think there was, from looking at the quiz scores, there was probably some difficulty around this topic. So, I would just kind of look through the material that we've had before and say, hey, do I understand what the purpose of a flowchart is? Do I understand what the purpose of a scatter plot is? Do I understand what the purpose of a fishbone is? Those kind of things. On the exam, I'm not going to ask you to draw one of these or anything like that, but I do think it's important to know what they're valuable for. The costs of quality, again, this was another kind of point of friction, a sticking point on the quiz. We could break down the costs of quality, and what we mean by the cost of quality is quality just doesn't happen. We have to invest in quality in order to get quality. We could invest in it from a proactive standpoint by having a plan that ensures quality throughout the organization. We could invest in kind of an appraisal aspect by having like a quality control lab. That was a question that was kind of a sticking point on the quiz. So when I have a quality control lab, really what they're doing is they're pulling samples of our production and inspecting it to make sure that it meets the standards that we set out to accomplish in terms of quality. So it's a little bit reactive. The prevention part is before we even produce, we have a plan that takes into account standards and business practices and things like that. And that's a different type of investment. So, and then internal failure or an external failure in my mind means, has the product left our control yet? If we catch a defect when we still have it, that's an internal failure. So scrap, rework, defects, things like that. We caught it. and we have to do something with it to fix it, that's an internal failure. The external failure is where we don't catch it and it gets out to the customer, and the customer is the one who tells us about it. So, hey, Kyle says, hey, you sent me 4 faulty units. What's up with this? I got to install these today. I'm on a timeline. And so we have to pay to get him 4 new units. We have to pay for the shipping. We probably have to expedite shipping. Kyle's not very happy with this, but we have to do all this. Otherwise, we could lose his business. So there's costs associated with that. So this is also explained in the text if you want or need to get further depth on that, but I would definitely encourage taking a look at those. And then the rest of the slides I'm not going to go through. I always include them because I think there's mileage to be had beyond the exam. So this framework that I've shown a number of times now in terms of supply chains based on supply and demand uncertainty. This framework that talks about segmenting the market by profit and volume. Once I identify a product or service in terms of profit margin as well as volume that I sell, then the benefit of this framework is that a lot of other things kind of fall out of that. What my marketing strategy should be, what my operation strategy should be, how I should manage inventory and distribution. So it's not a hard and fast thing, but I can get a lot of things going because they kind of go together. And then always understanding, this is going way back to how business strategy drives value chain in the first place. Business strategy is the why, supply chain strategy is the how. So if the business strategy, we want to be a low cost, we want to be the customer's number one low cost choice within a certain industry, then we should have a supply chain that accomplishes that. The supply chain strategy should talk about how we're going to be low cost. Maybe we have low cost shipping. Maybe we have a make to stock operation strategy and we can save costs there. Probably throughout all that is going to be some kind of lean strategy. But if our business strategy is we're going to compete on innovation, then we should have a supply chain strategy that accomplishes innovation. Probably first thing that's going to come to mind is a make to order operation strategy. Had another warrior tell me yesterday about Tesla. And I think some of you have talked about Tesla before. And I guess Tesla is completely make to order, where you have to go in and tell them, and this is for cars, I guess, to my understanding. I haven't researched it further, but you have to tell them all the specifications you want on a car, and then it takes like 3 to 4 months for you to get this car. And I'm sure Tesla likes it that way for a number of reasons. I think that one of the things that probably pops out is the mystique of having this, this car that was custom built for you. So that is a lot on the highlight reel. Any questions or discussion or on any of that? Things that you'd like me to go over again, questions, things that aren't clear, anything big or small? Okay, well, let's get after some Kahoot then. I have to watch the time, so I think before we even get into Kahoot, that I'm going to make sure it keeps on moving so that we have just a tiny bit at the time at the end to clear things out. I still owe the previous winner extra credit, but I will put on the bar, the first place winner will get 5 points, first place 5, second place 4, and then third place 3. So with that, we will get into it. We're going in the opposite direction. Looking for 4 more players. All right, super. We're going to roll with what we got. Heck yeah, we're ready. Let's do this. All right, good job. Operations compass transformation process. Pretty straightforward. All right. Okay, so yeah, this would, I think, be between operations and marketing for that voice of the customer piece. But in terms of logistics, they're the ones doing the delivery, and marketing wants to know that so that they can do the rollout. They can tell customers, hey, tomorrow that product's going to be here. You want to be here first in line, putting social distancing aside, obviously. Air Jordans, man. I can't call it. All right. All right. Good stuff. Marshall busting out there. Here we go. That's about what I expected. This is a tough one, but remember, we determine cost first, then we determine what profit we want to make, and that results in the price. This over here, this yellow, is actually the lean method. All right, and then these two up top are throwaways. All right, some new folks on the leaderboard. Good job, Stone. Okay, sourcing and logistics. Remember, sourcing high upstream, logistics are going to be moving it. All right, so handling considerations is the best. Quality function deployment we really didn't talk about. The beginning of the production schedule, I think, would be a discussion point between logistics and operations, or maybe even sourcing and operations in terms of, hey, when are these raw materials going to be available? But that's not the question. The question is sourcing and logistics, which the main thing is, okay, how are we going to move this? What requirements are involved in moving this? Tough round. All right. bottom line is quantitative, deals with numbers, formulas, really crunching and getting into those numbers. So the data we have is what we have to work with, and data is always limited in what it tells us. All right, we got some folks moving on. Jacob moving up fast. Here we go. Okay, the rest, let's see, are pretty much the opposite on each one if you go down. So the gold is air delivery is much more flexible than water in terms of those. Marshall holding the top spot. Someone's got to take him out. Disruption is a much more bigger problem. Bottleneck in comparison is usually comes down to some kind of capacity limitation. All right. Okay, with functional product, usually anybody can get us the raw materials, or we have a lot more selection there. So Marshall's still holding the top spot. Good job. Yep. Make to order means that at the high end, the customer is spelling out pretty much what they want to see in that product versus make to stock where everything looks the same. Kind of a little more and even split the difference than I would have liked. Remember, business strategy is the what, supply chain is the how we're going to accomplish that. So business strategy drives what supply chain strategy should be. All right. Good job, Jesse. Okay, this is a tough one. So supplier reliability is high, demand is uncertain. So we're not really sure where demand is going to occur. That means that we want to pool our resources so that if we see demand is happening in the York area, we can push our finished goods out there once demand is realized. But if we push all of our assets out to Harrisburg and then we find out that demand is really down in York, now we've got to shift gears. And it's a lot harder to do that. It's a lot easier just to keep things in until demand develops. All right, good job, Drew. Straightforward. Good job. Okay, good job, Owen. Okay, if demand doesn't change, then eventually we got to ask the question, why are we keeping all the stock on hand, the safety stock? All right, Nicole, good job. Straightforward. Good job. All right, Stone making it come back. All right, true or false? O or no? What would Ono say about producing small batches? All right, pretty straightforward. He was all about producing small batches, okay? Because when you produce in large batches, you're going to have inventory sitting, and that's potentially going to be wasteful, assuming that it all sells. If it doesn't sell, then you're going to have even more waste. Okay, again, this goes back to if the supplier is reliable and she knows her demand, she should bring that inventory down. In theory, she could have just pulses from her supplier and keep no inventory on hand. But if her supplier was unreliable, then she'd want to keep a little more inventory to offset that uncertainty. Okay, pretty good. Good job. All right, these are going to get faster and faster as we go on. little more across the board than what I'd like. It's less than truckload means the truck is not full. So it's kind of confusing. We actually want to minimize those shipments in which the truck is not entirely full. All right. Less than truckload is actually a true blue transportation term. Nick taking the lead. There we go. Good job. This is probably the toughest one of these all day. Ono is not a big fan of scrap metal. He would say, quit falling in love with the scrap metal, find out why we have scrap metal and adjust the process so we have less and less scrap metal. But don't get sidetracked, but by organizing scrap metal, decrease waste. That's the bottom line, which is not an example of waste. Energy, yeah, it's not on the list. Not to be confused with motion, okay? Energy is kind of, how we keep things moving. Motion is actually physical movement. All right, good job, Austin. Holy cow, 9 in a row, taking the top spot. It's going to be tight. Here we go, 21 to 29. 8 more. Good. Same question we had before. All right. It's going to be tight. Level. Remember, generic inventory, last minute adjustments, that's that postponement in production process. All right, the fight for first. Scatter plot, examining relationship between two variables. That's what we were looking at. Marshall coming back hard. Good job. Okay, yeah, monitoring the flow of business is not a purpose of inventory. That's not why we have it. There's too much money wrapped up in inventory. We can monitor the flow of business other ways. Good job, Marshall, taking it back. Okay, remember, raw materials become part of the product. MRO sustains the transformation process. Sorry, I skipped back to past the leaderboard. I didn't mean to do that. All right, safety stock we really don't want to touch until we have an uninspected change in demand. Our regular inventory is what we should be replenishing out of. Okay, the fight for the number top 3 spots, which is not a type of inventory. All right, complimentary. It's never something we've talked about. Everything else we have talked about. All right, good job, Casey. 2 more questions. Yeah, the rest, space versus money, ordering versus setup costs. Ordering and setup costs are actually in the same bucket. We want to balance ordering and holding cost. And then supporting suppliers versus the bottom line. That's good to see nobody chose that. It's kind of a throwaway. All right, James, good job. Last question. Here we go. There's only one right answer here. Final what? Okay. No. Well, at least you're honest. Let's see how it turned out. Awesome. Good job. Good job. All right. Good job to the winners. Good job, Marshall. Taking a photo, so I will not forget this time. Good job to the runners-up as well. All right, so to close us out, and I will post that link to that Kahoot, so you can play it to your heart's content over the next week, and I'll make sure that I annotate the extra credit from that one and the extra credit from the ones in the past. So a couple things I just want to say as we close out this course, okay, and I call this the outro. All right. First of all, I've enjoyed working with all of you. I just want to say that. This is not about me. It's about you. So value chain is everywhere. Hope is not a plan. Hopefully you've gotten that out of this course. I love this quote from Bruce Lee, because education and value chain also is all about what you make of it. You all have different goals, interests, and desires, and the only right answer to what you want to do in life is defined by you, as long as it's not making meth out in Arizona. But the important thing about education, and hopefully you've gotten that out of this course, is you take something away, all right? You kind of put to the side what didn't help you, and then you add to it all. And as whether you're driving down the highway or you're just walking around, value chain is everywhere, and hopefully now you can go, I wonder what's going on right there. There's a place off the highway we drive past all the time. You probably know it. It's down by the rail yard. There's all sorts of cement blocks and pallets, and I always go, man, I wonder what's happening down there. And as long as you maintain that curiosity, you will do well, because you will constantly be learning. You are the future, and I mean this sincerely. You all are going to lead this world through the good times and the bad. And so it is so important for you to keep questioning and seeking knowledge. If you don't understand, if you don't question the knowledge and the information that's being given to you, you can't lead effectively. And so, at the risk of sounding cliche or corny, I know that I am counting on you to gain that knowledge so that you can lead us through not only this time of current crisis, but the future challenges. And they're going to come. They're going to come. But I personally have faith in you. You are the future, and you are pretty badass, I must say. And now you've got all those mad skills, man. You've got all these mad skills out of this course. You know more than most people. And that is the thing about life. There are those people who know things, and there are those people who don't. And to some degree, all you have to do is know a little bit more than the next guy to make a contribution in this world. Hopefully, you don't stop there and you keep pursuing the knowledge and putting it into practice. Let's talk a little bit just about the short term. I know we're headed into finals week, and hopefully not in this course, although it may be in this course, maybe in other courses. And just through the whole challenge of this online learning thing, I have to hand it to you. You all have been warriors and rolled with the change. And I just encourage you, stay in the fight, man. It's almost over. You're going to rock out next week. And just, I believe in you, and just persevere. And in closing, if there's any way I can help you in the future, just come up on the net. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, you can help me by not having this final. Well, that's not kind of the thing I'm talking about. I'm talking about beyond this course. If there's a way that, whether it's a conversation or something else, you think I can help you, then please let me know and let's talk. Beyond that, I've enjoyed sharing this course with you. I wish you all the best. And with that, I'll stay on until we clear the call. Otherwise, I won't see you next week, but I look forward to seeing your final performance in this class, and we'll go from there. Take care.
Thank you, Dr. Sheck.